1 week season.
Hey, and welcome in, OWS fam. So glad you were with us here. We are back in the DFS lab. And as always, this show presented by 1 week season, where we build a lineup on DraftKings, use it as a way to talk through the upcoming slate. In this case, we're looking at week 14. So you're watching this on Thursday, December 5th. I'm your host, Cheeseman, and it is my privilege, as always, to welcome up Mr. StatATL. And Stat, how was just, the last week for you? Obviously, we had the Thanksgiving slate, and then obviously the main slate as well.
Man, it was a good holiday week. Always good to spend time with the families. And daily fantasy was fine, kind of uneventful. We had some decent builds in kind of walking through that process that we did the video on for the OWS subscribers.
Yeah.
And talked a little bit about it with Toe Tag and Tambo on that other video that we put out, I think, on the same channel last week. So I was able to put that into play. Didn't quite nail the first game, which was kind of the key to getting to the slate. But, probably I think we had about 50% ROI, so not horrendous. It's kind of one of those slates where there's 3 games, so you kind of have to be pretty close to the optimal to get a really top finish. So I was happy with that. And then we had some sweats on Sunday. We had some real good builds. Just didn't quite pan out for us. I don't know. I play a real tight player pool, as we were always talking about, and I had 3 defenses, and all 3 of them scored 5 or less points. And so I don't know. I had a whole bunch of rosters that were. I think scoring in like the low 190s, mid 190s was like a really strong score last week. Like winning a lot of tournaments, like low 190s. I think I had like 9 rosters between like 173 and 177, and that's with like 3 points or 4 points from a defense. So, you get 15 from the defense. I think the top scorer was 20, and again, can't win them every week, but so decent. How about for you?
Yeah, I mean, Thanksgiving, I just kind of was, kind of took more of a just going to do this for fun approach. But I also did the approach that, you talked about throughout the week with the duplicating lineups and late swapping. And it was a lot of fun. I mean, I had a good time kind of just, going back and being able to kind of position certain lineups with different stacks and that kind of thing. It did not pan out on Thanksgiving. But then on the main slate, I did decently, but I only entered 3 lineups. I just, with traveling home, we traveled home we were in Tennessee, and then driving back home to North Carolina on Sunday. Really smart idea because everyone's going home on Sunday. The traffic on the I-81 was horrendous. So it just was, it was like took 2 hours longer than normal easily. So that was brutal. But I just didn't have a lot of time to really put thought into lineups. So I'm like, I'm not just going to, I've always found that if I don't have time to really do a good job with my research, then I'm probably going to be, punting money into the stratosphere, so to speak. And so, but I actually cashed 2 of 3 lineups. I had Anthony Richardson, and then I had Bucky Irving in every lineup. Had some Mark Andrews, which, we talked about on the show last week. And just some different pieces mixed here and there. The biggest thing that hurt me was A.J. Brown just, not really hitting. I think that he could have hit, and Baltimore certainly is an attackable matchup, but Philly simply decided that they weren't really going to throw. And so A.J. Brown, he had 5 for 66 at the half, and that's what he finished with. So that was disappointing. But overall, I played fine. It's one of those weeks where I wish I had more time to really research, because I think it could have been a great week, but I just didn't have the time, man. It's just, them's the breaks sometimes. But let's pull up last week's lineup real fast because this one cashed, and this brings us to, I think we talked about it, 6 of 13 on the season. This was a solid build. I think that we kind of went through a couple builds on the show, or didn't go through it on we talked through some 2v2s on the air, but this one landed on the double tight end, which both Hunter Henry and Mark Andrews ended up hitting. This ended up being a pretty sharp build.
Yeah, it just got over the cash line. I think it scored 142 or 143, and the cash line was like 141. So just squeaked over. But for rosters that we're building on Tuesday and Wednesday, for the Sunday slate, I it's hard to complain. So, we're close to 50% on the season. I'm content with it. But yeah, I mean, we had some strong plays here. I mean, Bucky Irving was over 30 points, and that kind of helps propel and offset the fact that Vidal only put up 2 points. So, help kind of offset some of that. So yeah, let's try to keep it going. Let's try to keep it going again this week and see if we can get right to that 50%, 7 out of 14.
Let's do it, man. Yeah, let's absolutely do it. We got week 14 coming up. Any initial thoughts from you as far as teams that you like, offenses you like? I'm going to go ahead and add DraftKings here to the screen, and we can jump into red zone. What are your initial thoughts and what's kind of standing out to you so far? I know you've done your first look. You did your video, which you can check that out in the top right. You did your first look, which is just kind of your overview, kind of typically on Tuesday is when you do that, and so you probably kind of already have an initial idea of what you like and what you don't.
Yeah, I mean, I think that there's some really interesting games and game environments that I think are going to probably draw a lot of attention. And then there's some spots that are just like one-off spots that I think are just going to have some like mega ownership, just because they're just such strong plays on paper. And I think that there's a possibility that we may build a lineup that includes all three of them. And spoiler alert, I think some of these kind of slam dunk plays are at running back, and we may just build a lineup that has all three of them and see if we can make it work with some correlation and some value. Because I do think there's some good value on the slate, specifically at quarterback. I think there's, overall, I think the position is kind of slimy, for lack of a better term. But I think that there's a couple of kind of pay down guys.
Did you say slimy? Slimy?
I did. Slimy, like gross.
Okay. Okay. I like that usage. Nice.
So yeah, I mean, I think there's a couple pay down guys that we can kind of make work, because some of the running backs that I really like are, I think, the two most expensive ones on the slate. So we'll see how that comes together. What about you? What were some of the matchups or the games that kind of stood out to you?
Yeah, well, I mean, I definitely, the Dolphins, I think at home is a spot that I like, taking on a cold weather team in the Jets. And, Tua, I just feel like his price has not really caught up with his production. Now, he's had 3 straight weeks of basically hitting 4X or more at his current salary. The first week 11 against the Raiders, it was kind of right on the edge, maybe like a 3.8X or something. He got 23.5 fantasy points. Well, actually, at the time, he was 6K. He's 6.3K now. So, yeah, 6.3 times 4. I guess that's like kind of like 25. You need about 25. But again, I don't want to call Tua now, and it's going to be the top signal, and he ends up 15 this week. But I do think that at home, this offense is putting up points. Even against Green Bay on Thanksgiving, they only scored 17 actual points, but Tua still put up like numbers. And so I think that I can imagine that this will be one of the offenses and Tua will be one of the quarterbacks that is in my tighter player pool this week, just because I think that his ability to get 25 to 30 is very much there. The high priced quarterbacks, I'm not necessarily thinking that they're going to smash this week. And man, I mean, we're still kind of waiting for Tyreek Hill to have his blow-up game, if it will ever come. But his price is pretty attractive. So I like Miami at home a lot. That's one of the spots that I'll be looking at in my tighter pool this week. Certainly some Tua stacks, hopefully a couple different ways for me.
Man, I hope we can put a pin in this for next week and kind of revisit this, because I liked Tua on my first pass and then did a little bit of kind of deeper dive into it. And the Jets haven't allowed a quarterback to throw for 275 yards yet this season, and no quarterback has thrown for more than 2 passing touchdowns. So it's kind of going to be kind of a back. We'll kind of see how that one breaks, because Tua's been playing really well, but the Jets have just historically been really tough against quarterbacks this season, and they've played some decent ones. So be kind of curious to see how that breaks. I think it could go either way.
Yeah, I know. And that's why I like that kind of that stat level approach that you take, because that is an important, super important trend to me, especially at this point in the season. So I'm glad you mentioned that because, yeah, man, I mean, if he's not going for over 300, Tua, just because he's not really a rushing quarterback, you really do need him to go for over 300 or throw multiple touchdowns. What about touchdowns? Have the Jets allowed like multiple touchdown passes to many quarterbacks?
No quarterback has thrown more than 2 all season.
Man, yeah, then I guess suddenly that
Doesn't
play
mean
doesn't
it
seem as
can't happen,
attractive to me.
Tom. It doesn't mean
It doesn't mean it
happen.
can't, yeah, and yeah, but I mean that definitely has cast some doubt. But I mean, again, that's a very straightforward take right there. So it's hard to argue with that, and it certainly is a valid point. So
I think that's why when I was doing my quick kind of first look and evaluation, I was just like, why I came to gross or slimy on the quarterbacks, because it's, some of the ones that you are attracted to, I was just kind of starting to do a deeper dive, and it's kind of like I was poking a bunch of holes. I'm like, I don't know that this is where I want to go.
yeah.
So
What about Baker? What about the Tampa Bay at home, like kind of their offense just having a blow up game? I mean, Baker's had 2 straight disappointing showings. I mean, including last week against the Panthers. No, wait, sorry, that was last week. So were there any trends you noticed that would put you off Baker?
no, I liked Baker. I think what I liked more in this game was actually Aiden O'Connell, which is so gross to say.
I kind of did too, actually. I didn't want to say it on the show. I was too embarrassed to admit it.
Yeah, I mean, so like if you're just looking at, I'm not going to say that Aiden O'Connell is a world beater of a quarterback, but if you look at who the Bucs have played, you've got Jared Goff and Kirk Cousins. You've got some big names, Lamar and Patrick Mahomes, but you've got Purdy and Bryce Young. All of those guys had 300 or more total yards against Tampa. And so, I'm looking at AOC O'Connell here. He's sub 5,000 at 4,800. He's coming off the best game of his career. He threw for 340 and 2 last week. So to me, he's kind of intriguing just because he's got his pairing partners are just so straightforward and obvious. It's Myers or it's Brock Bowers. So to me, that's an interesting spot. I mean, you could kind of say the same thing for Baker. You know what I mean? Like the offense flows through 2 pass catchers on their offense as well. But they're both, they're more expensive. Evans is more expensive. And I mean, I guess Otten is cheaper on that side. But, Baker is at least $1,000. What's Baker's price? It's 48 for O'Connell.
6,400. He's 6,400.
Okay, so he's 1,600 more.
No, that's material.
It's material. So I'm not saying I don't like him. That's just kind of where I was drawn. Because when I was doing my first look, and if you've watched the video again, in top corner or whatever,
top right corner, check it out.
Where I'm drawn this week is at running back and 2 guys that cost a combined salary of 17,000. So like if you're going to pay up twice at running back or at least once, you got to find some salary relief somewhere. And so for me, where I was kind of gravitating towards was either at tight end or at quarterback.
Yeah. Dude, you're making me curious on this build. You ready to jump in and get started on this?
Yeah, let's jump in, and let's start with a slimy quarterback because that's where I want to go. But I think we're going to go to a spot we haven't talked about yet, and we're going to look at the Titans and the Jags. So
yes,
if we look at Will Levis, so half the quarterbacks that have faced the Jaguars this year have either thrown for 330 or more yards or threw 4 touchdowns. So, I mean, there's some big names on that list. You got Josh Allen there and, you got CJ Stroud and Tua, but you've also got, Joe Flacco and Caleb Williams that have thrown for 330 or have thrown for 4 touchdowns.
Yeah.
So, to me, like at 5K, like I feel like this is the worst by far the worst defense that Will Levis has faced. And he's got 275 passing yards or more in 2 out of his last 3 games against much better defenses. So I think this is an interesting spot for him. He's 5K and his passing partners are pretty straightforward as well. So I feel like this is where I want to start. And I think with Will Levis, you can kind of go one of two ways. You can look to double stack him, which we may do, because all three of his kind of primary pass catchers, or you could even include Tony Pollard, are pretty relatively inexpensive. Pollard is obviously a little bit more at 6,400. But the most obvious partner is Calvin Ridley. Since that DeAndre Hopkins trade back in, I think, week 7 or 8 or something like that, he's averaging 8.5 targets a game. And, the Jaguars have allowed 7 wide receivers to exceed 100 yards this season, So we know that that's there. The Jags have been friendly. And Ridley's getting the opportunity. So let's throw in Calvin Ridley into this build. And I think tentatively, we could look at Pollard here to kind of try to grab all the Tennessee offense. Or if you wanted to kind of go for a little bit of a cheaper option, you could go, go to tight end and pair him with Chigo Okonkwo. But I think from now, let's just start it with a skinny stack and see how this goes, see where we potentially need salary and give us a little bit of, room to wiggle with, because I think from here I want to jump into the running backs, because I want to go back to 2020 or 2021 and play Team Jam them in.
Yes, I knew that reference was coming at some point.
Yeah, so top of the board, Saquon Barkley. Panthers have allowed an opposing running back to score 20 or more DK points on 9 different occasions. Again, they've played 12 or 13 games now. So basically, almost every team has got a running back scoring 20 points. Saquon Barkley's averaging 26 DK points. It's kind of the nut matchup for him. I think this is probably the best on-paper play on the slate. You could probably argue Isaiah Garendo, which we're probably going to try to jam into this lineup too. But for me, Barkley he's expensive. And I'm going to be curious to see where his ownership goes, because I think what will be a common way to approach this is kind of offset his $9,000 salary by pairing him with Isaac Garendo, who plays for the 49ers. So, CMC, Jordan Mason, both out for San Francisco. So Garendo's going to lead the backfield. He's only had 2 games where he saw more than 5 touches. And in those games, he went for 99 yards on 10 touches and 102 and a touchdown on 17 touches. I think he's averaging just under 7 yards a touch. So he's been explosive. And this is a great matchup against the Bears. The last 5 weeks, the Bears have allowed 119 to James Conner, 129 to Aaron Jones, 134 to Josh Jacobs, just 77 to Ramondre Stevenson, a little bit of a weaker offense there, and then 228 to the combination of Montgomery and Gibbs. So they've been getting gashed by running backs. And basically every San Francisco running back has been successful. So I want to throw Barkley and Garendo into this lineup.
Right, yeah, Garendo. I'm not even sure how you spell his name.
G-U-E.
Go this route.
Yeah.
I like to just type in the search box. I'm a search box guy.
Yeah. So, if we're going to... Yeah, I guess if we're talking Team Jam them in, I think so this will be common, probably. It's early in the week. I think that a Barkley-Garendo pairing of 2 running backs is going to be common. What I don't think people will do will be then pay up again at running back. Yeah. And there's a really great spot, in my opinion, just on paper, in Alvin Kamara playing the Giants. In the Giants' last 6 games, they've allowed 5 running backs. So, and they're not huge names. It's Rico Dowdle and Najee Harris and Chuba Hubbard, Bucky Irving, and then Saquon Barkley. All 5 of those in the last 6 weeks have put up 120 or more yards against the Giants. So, I think this is a great spot for Kamara because Taysom Hill just went on IR on Monday. So, where's this offense going to flow? It's already flowing almost entirely through Kamara. That's got to keep happening. So, I think that this is another spot where he's going to see 25 probably opportunities or touches between targets and rushes. And so, I know 8,000 is expensive, but this feels like a spot where he's likely going to get you 25 to 30 points.
Yeah, last week he had 29 touches. The previous 2 weeks were a little down, but I think they did feed Taysom more. So all that to say, I love the play. Absolutely on board with this build. And I do like how you really highlighted the fact that people are not going to want to pay up twice at running back. They're just going to take, like what you said, they're going to say, I'm going to pay up for, and this is where it kind of gets into kind of the construction aspect of it is like getting different, not just by, say I'm going to play this guy who's 2% owned, but also trying to construct differently. And this is a great way to think about it. And this is obviously something we talk about at 1 week season, but people are going to say, since I'm going to pay up at one running back, I'll just throw Garendo in and then move on with the rest of my lineup, then not really think about paying up for two running backs. So I like how you highlighted that.
Yeah. So when you do this, what we've kind of done, and let's go in and just throw in kind of a mid-tier defense like we like to do. And so when I was doing my first look, I highlighted, I think, the normal kind of 5 defenses. And one of the defenses I liked right in the middle was Arizona, like right at 3,000 at home against Seattle. So, and why I just want to throw in kind of a placeholder D here is by kind of paying up twice at running back, like we're locking in some of what we think is some of the best on paper plays. And while some of them will be popular, I think very few people are going to pay up twice at running back. So while you're now playing popular players, your construction, as you were saying, is different. And this is just going to lead us to a different build than what the majority of the field is going to do. Mm-hmm. Whereas, if you're just kind of following the herd, it doesn't mean that it can't win. It doesn't mean that a Barkley, Garendo, no other running back build, just those two, isn't going to ship the millie. It certainly could. But that's going to be a lot more common of an approach than a double pay-up approach. So I like kind of going this route. It kind of gives us a different salary allocation than I think people are going to have at some of these remaining positions.
Absolutely. Yep. Yeah, absolutely love it. Okay, cool. So with the placeholder D in there, you got 3 spots left. So where do you want to go next? Are we looking for value? Or I guess we haven't. Do you want to kind of correlate with this Tennessee stack at all?
With the Tennessee stack, probably not. I don't know that I think that Jacksonville has to keep the game competitive.
Yes,
for
Mac Jones at quarterback.
Yeah, I still feel like, they're going to throw if Tennessee gets to 28 points, it's probably because Calvin Ridley helped get there. So I don't need them to continue to get pushed because of how concentrated Tennessee is as an offense just to begin with. Like if Tennessee's scoring points, it's more than likely coming through either Ridley or Nick Westbrook-Akine, who, don't even get me started on that one. The guy's got 8 touchdowns this year on 20 targets, or 20 receptions. It's absurd. Everything that he catches magically goes for a touchdown. That's not sustainable. But yeah, it's Ridley or it's Pollard. So to me, I'm willing to kind of go. Let's say that if Tennessee is scoring some points, that it's a reasonable possibility it's flowing through Ridley, and I don't need a bring back there. So yep. I think that if I'm not going to have a bring back, I probably don't want to double stack this build. Because in double stacking this, I'm basically saying I'm expecting Will Levis to throw for 303 and his pass catchers to both have significant games. I just don't know that Will Levis is going to be throwing the ball 30, 35, 40 times if Jacksonville's not keeping the game competitive. So I think that if you're going to build a double stack, you more than likely want to have a run back of some kind. We could explore that with Chico Okonkwo and then Brian Thomas. That would fit. I just think I don't want to go that route on this build. So I think we're probably going to need to spend a little bit down, maybe a mid-tier guy at tight end. Let's kind of plug that in and see where that leaves us. So, in kind of doing my first look, kind of in that mid-range. I really liked Cade Otton this week. Otton's averaging 8 targets a game since Chris Godwin's injury back in week 7. And the Vikings have allowed games of 10 for 90 and a touchdown to Kelsey, 5 for 100 and 2 touchdowns to Mike Gesicki, and 6 for 101 and 2 touchdowns to Jonnu Smith in just their last 5 games. So tight ends have been torching the Vikings because you can't really run on the Vikings. And so, I mean, you can. And so I think Bucky and Irving will be interesting, but again, split backfield there coming off of that hip injury. I think it was a hip injury. I think that Otton is kind of the number 2 spot in this offense. It's Mike Evans and then it's Otton. So at 4,400, I like Otton.
Love it. Okay, so yeah, that means that we have got 4,800 left at the 2 wide receiver spots, which has been with the show that I did with Hilo on Tuesday, and you can check that out if you want, upper right-hand corner. We kind of landed in a similar spot. It was a completely different build for the most part. Did have Barkley, but this 4,800 range leftover receiver. So I'm excited to see kind of the approach that you take in this one.
Yeah, so I want to probably do some type of mini correlation here, either with Barkley, so maybe grabbing a Panther, or with Kamara, because I'm looking at this and saying I'm paying up at both of these 2 positions, and I want them to continue to remain involved. So, we've seen it this season where, Philadelphia gets out to a big lead, and in the second half, like it's Gainwell and it's Will Shipley. You know what I mean? So and with Kamara, you're likely going to see Keandre Miller get activated this week and see some touches. So I think if Kamara is getting his full run, it's because the Giants are giving them a little bit of a game. And so with Drew Lock back at quarterback again this week, kind of a little bit of a gunslinger. I like Malik Neighbors. He's 6,900. We don't have the salary for that. So kind of the more downfield kind of threat for the Giants, who does play a good bit of snaps and has seen some spike weeks this year, is Darius Slayton, and he's 4,300. So I like what that potentially gives us in this lineup, gives us a little bit of that salary flexibility, kind of get more into that 5K range. If we can't find somewhere we like to land, we can look to pay down a little bit of defense. I do have a cheaper defense that I like. But I think not super correlated, not that it has to be. I mean, so here you could go Xavier Legette at 4,900 to pair with Barkley. He's seen a good amount of targets.
Yes.
6 or more targets in 4 out of the last 5 weeks. I think he has some sneaky upside here as well. I mean, Carolina's been playing a bit better, but I think this is a little bit of a narrative, but I really like Amari Cooper this week. I think that really clever lateral pass on Monday Night Football to Josh Allen, I think that's going to help build him some rapport, to be honest with you. And, if you're looking at the Rams, like the Rams have been absolutely gashed by some outside wide receivers. Like, I'm going to find some stats here for you. Jamison Williams, 121 and a touchdown. Jawan Jennings, 175 and 3 touchdowns. Justin Jefferson, 115. Jackson Smith-Njigba, 180 yards and 2 touchdowns. A.J. Brown went for over 100 yards and a touchdown. Like, they have been gashed by some.
Yeah, no joke.
Some of them are more elite, but Amari Cooper is a strong wide receiver that has had some ceiling games. And at 5,100, he well has 20, 25, 30 points within his range of outcomes. So it may not be this week, but he's a guy I'm not sure will attract a ton of ownership.
Yeah.
And I think kind of gives us some ceiling upside at kind of the mid-range to pay down wide receiver, because that's what we need on this roster. We're paying up at running back, hoping to kind of lock in some 25, 30-point scores. out of Barkley and Kamara, we need some of these lower mid-tier, mid-priced wide receivers. We need to try to find two probably that go for 15 or 20 points at 4 or 5K. That's what we need in this lineup. So that's what we're betting on here.
Love it. Love it. All right, going to plug Cooper in. Just going to quickly make the shift on the late swap since Gurendo's playing in the late window. Going to throw Kamara into the running back slot and then Gurendo into the flex. And then, yeah, man, that will – so the lineup that we landed on for those of you podcast listeners is Will Levis at QB with Saquon and Kamara jammed in at those two running back spots, and then Calvin Ridley, Darius Slayton, Amari Cooper, Cade Otton, Isaiah Gurendo, excuse me, and the Cardinals D, and that's it, man. Stat, great build as always, dude, and I like kind of your thoughts on the Cooper situation. Again, a guy who hasn't really had his day yet as a Buffalo Bill, but you do kind of have to figure, like, I mean, I guess he did have. I'm not sure if he had been traded yet in that Week 7 game against Tennessee, but certainly know that the potential is he certainly has that game in him, and so hopefully, and maybe it will come this week. But any other thoughts you want to add before we ship this one?
Nope. Just as always, hoping to see some more OWS pennants at the top of leaderboards again this week, and hopefully this roster is 7 out of 14 and gets us back at 50%, which is honestly just really quite strong for rosters built on Tuesday and Wednesday for GPP tournaments.
It is, man. It absolutely is. Well, Stat, as always, man, thanks for the time. Again, hope you ship one this week. Hope we both do, man. I mean, got about 5 weeks left here of the regular season, so let's make the most of it. But thanks for your time as always, and we'll see you next time.